नमस्कार विद्यार्थी मित्रांनो, माझं नाव सोनम आहे आणि मी उत्कर्ष माध्यमिक विद्यालय सेमी इंग्लिश मीडियमला सायन्स हा विषय शिकवते. तर आज आपण सायन्सचं चॅप्टर नंबर 7 एनर्जी फ्लो इन एन इकोसिस्टम या चॅप्टर शिकणार आहोत. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट. In this chapter, we are going to learn about food chain and food web. Next one is the energy pyramid and third one is biogeochemical cycle. In biogeochemical cycle, we are going to learn about carbon cycle, oxygen cycle and as well as nitrogen cycle. So let's start. Before starting the chapter, we are going to revise some topics. Do you know what is meant by ecosystem? Ecosystem is an abiotic and biotic component. Do you know what is meant by ecosystem? Ecosystem is an interaction between biotic and abiotic component. Look at this picture. Here, plants and cow comes under biotic components because they all are living organisms. And sun, oxygen, cloud, mountain comes under abiotic component because they are non-living organisms. So, interaction between biotic and abiotic components are known as ecosystem. Let's start with question number 2. Which are the different types of ecosystem? There are mainly two types of ecosystem, natural ecosystem and man-made ecosystem. Man-made ecosystem is also known as artificial ecosystem and natural ecosystem is further divided into two types, aquatic ecosystem and terrestrial ecosystem. In aquatic ecosystem like pond, river, sea, etc. And terrestrial ecosystem like mountain, zoo, forest, etc. Okay, let's start with question number 3. How do interaction take place between biotic and abiotic factor of an ecosystem? There are various biogeochemical cycles. They biotic and abiotic factor of an ecosystem interact with each other. Let's start energy flow in an ecosystem. All living organisms requires energy to sustain their life. Look at this flow chart. Here, plant requires sunlight for its growth and for its food. Grasshopper is dependent on plant for its food. Frog is dependent on grasshopper for its food. And snake is dependent on frog for its food. So what you observe in this flow chart, plant produce their own food with the help of sunlight. So plants are producers and rest of animal and insects are consumer. So let's start. Primary consumer. Primary consumers are dependent on plant and their products. Example, grasshopper, birds, etc. Primary consumers are also known as herbivores. Next is secondary consumer. Secondary consumers are directly dependent on herbivores. So, frog is an example of secondary consumer. Next is top level consumer. Top level consumer is also known as apex consumer. These consumers are dependent on herbivorous as well as on carnivorous. No other animal feed upon top level consumer. Example, lion, tiger. Next one is mixed consumer. Mixed consumer is also known as omnivorous. Omnivorous are dependent on autotrophs, herbivorous as well as on carnivorous. Example is human. So let's start with our next topic, that is food chain and food web. Let's start with food chain and food web. In food chain, all living organisms requires energy to survive. Here, producer means grass. Grasshopper is dependent on grass for its food. Frog is dependent on grasshopper for its food. Snake is dependent on frog for its food. And finally, eagle is dependent on snake for its food. And when eagle dies, its body decomposes by the fungi and bacteria. Fungi and bacteria comes under saprophyte because they are dependent on dead and decaying matter. So, grass produce their own food with the help of sunlight. So, grass is a producer and other animals, birds and insects are consumer and fungi is saprophyte. So, in a food chain, food which provide energy from one trophic level to another topic level is called flow of energy. हिअर ग्रासला कोण खातं? ग्रासहोपर. तर ग्रास आणि ग्रासहोपर मध्ये जे रिलेशन आहे तो आहे ट्रॉपिक 1 लेवल. ग्रासहोपर अँड फ्रॉग मध्ये जे रिलेशन आहे तो काय आहे? ट्रॉपिक 2 लेवल. फ्रॉग अँड स्नेक मध्ये जे रिलेशन आहे तो ट्रॉपिक 3 लेवल. So tropic level of another tropic level is called flow of energy, and this interaction go on continuously between producer to consumer and consumer to saprophytes. So let's start with food web. We have learned how food chain works. An ecosystem consists of various food chains that are interconnected at various level. Let's see here. ग्रासला इथे कोण खातं? डिअर, स्क्वेरल, ग्रासहोपर अँड कंगारू. आणि त्या डिअरला कोण खाणार आहे? टायगर. स्क्वेरलला कोण खाणार आहे? वल्चर, फॉक्स एज वेल एज टायगर. कंगारूला कोण खाणार आहे? टायगर, फॉक्स, वल्चर. म्हणजे हे जे इंटरॅक्शन आहे फूड चेन मध्ये याला आपण काय बोलणार? फूड वेब. सो इंटरॅक्शन between the food chain is also known as food web. Interactive food chain at various levels are called as food web. So let's start with energy pyramid. In energy pyramid, first topic is trophic level. Trophic level म्हणजे काय? जिथून आपण एनर्जी कंझ्युम करतो त्या लेवलला आपण काय बोलणार? ट्रॉफिक लेवल. We have already learned about food chain. So let's see. ग्रासला कोण खाणार? ग्रासहोपर. ग्रासहोपरला कोण खाणार? फ्रॉग. फ्रॉगला कोण खाणार? स्नेक. आणि स्नेकला कोण? वल्चर. अँड व्हेन वल्चर डाईज इट्स बॉडी डिकम्पोज बाय फंजाय अँड बॅक्टेरिया. अँड फंजाय अँड बॅक्टेरिया आर सॅप्रोफाइट्स. सो ग्रास अँड ग्रासहोपर जे आहे ते ट्रॉपिक लेवल 1 मध्ये होणार. ग्रासहोपर अँड फ्रॉगचे मिडल जे रिलेशन आहे तो ट्रॉपिक 2 लेवल. फ्रॉग अँड स्नेक चे रिलेशन आहे तो ट्रॉपिक 3 लेवल आहे. तर द अमाउंट ऑफ एनर्जी ग्रॅज्युअली डिक्रीजेस फ्रॉम प्रोड्युसर टू टॉप लेवल कन्झ्युमर. व्हॉट इज मीन? जेव्हा आपण प्रोड्युसर टू कन्झ्युमर कडे मूव्ह करतो, 1 लेवल टू नेक्स्ट लेवल कडे मूव्ह करतो, तेव्हा आपली जी एनर्जी आहे ती काय होते? डिक्रीज होऊन जाते. अँड ओनली 10% एनर्जी इज ट्रान्सफर्ड फ्रॉम वन ट्रॉपिक लेवल टू अनदर ट्रॉपिक लेवल. अँड रेस्ट ऑफ एनर्जी काय होते? एन्व्हायरमेंट मध्ये लॉस्ट होऊन जाते. ओके. सो ऑल प्रोड्युसर्स इन अन इकोसिस्टम आर कॉल्ड एज प्रोड्युसर्स. फर्स्ट ट्रॉपिक लेवल म्हणजे काय? ऑल प्रोड्युसर्स इन अन इकोसिस्टम व जे डिपेंडेंट आहे त्यांना आपण काय बोलणार? हर्बिव्होरस. कारण हर्बिव्होरस जे आहेत ते काय खातात? प्लांट्स, ग्रास, प्लांट्स, प्रोडक्ट्स एक्सेट्रा. Means herbivores are first tropic level. Second tropic level म्हणजे काय? Those who are dependent on herbivores are known as carnivorous. So carnivorous means tropic 2 level. And tropic 3rd level म्हणजे काय? Those who are dependent on carnivorous as well as on herbivorous are known as omnivorous. Best example is human. So let's start with next slide. Energy flow one organism to another in a linear way, and only 10% of energy actually moves from one tropic level to another tropic level. So let's start. Look at this graphical representation. Here, producer कडे 10,000 usable energy आहे. जेव्हा टू वन लेवल टू अनदर लेवल कडे मूव्ह होणार तेव्हा फक्त 10% एनर्जी मूव्ह होणार अँड 90% एनर्जी एन्व्हायरमेंट मध्ये लॉस्ट होणार. सो व्हेन एनर्जी मूव्स फ्रॉम प्रोड्युसर टू प्रायमरी लेवल कन्झ्युमर, इट्स remains only 1000. And when it moves from primary consumer to secondary consumer, it turns into 100. And when it moves from secondary consumer to tertiary consumer, it's get into 10. And rest of energy lost into the atmosphere. So energy flow one organism to another in a linear way. Only 10% of energy actually moves from one tropic level to another tropic level. And जेव्हा आपण वन लेवल टू नेक्स्ट लेवलकडे मूव्ह करतो तेव्हा आपली एनर्जी सुद्धा कमी होते आणि ऑर्गॅनिझमची क्वांटिटी आहे ती सुद्धा काय होते कमी होऊन जाते. आणि दिस पॅटर्न ऑफ एनर्जी एक्सचेंज इज कॉल्ड ॲज पिरामिड ऑफ एनर्जी. या टाईपचे पॅटर्नची एनर्जी एक्सचेंज आहे त्याला आपण काय बोलतात पिरामिड ऑफ एनर्जी. या व्हिडिओमध्ये आपण इतकंच पाहणार आहोत. नेक्स्ट बायोजिओकेमिकल सायकल ते आपण नेक्स्ट व्हिडिओमध्ये पाहूया. धन्यवाद. लेट्स स्टार्ट विथ बायोजिओकेमिकल सायकल. बायोजिओकेमिकल सायकल म्हणजे काय? The cyclic flow of nutrients within an ecosystem is called biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle is a movement of chemical substance due to interaction between biotic and abiotic components of an earth. So, do you know biogeochemical cycle indicates what? Bio indicates all living organisms like plant, earth, animal, insects, etc. And geo indicates all abiotic components like oxygen, mountain, air, water, which are non-living things. And chemical cycle indicates all reactions occurring on the earth like carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, corrosion, etc. Biogeochemical cycle mainly two types. Let's see. Gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. So what is gaseous cycle? Gaseous cycle is an accumulation of main abiotic gaseous nutrient material is found in the earth atmosphere. जे abiotic gaseous nutrients आहे ते अर्थच्या atmosphere मध्ये काय होतात कलेक्ट होऊन जातात. तर ते कशामध्ये येणार गॅसेस सायकल मध्ये. एक्झाम्पल ऑक्सिजन, नायट्रोजन, कार्बन हे काय होतात एन्व्हायरमेंट मध्ये अक्युमुलेट होतात आणि हे कशामध्ये येणार तर त्याला आपण काय बोलणार गॅसियस सायकल. नेक्स्ट इज सेडिमेंटरी सायकल. अन अक्युमुलेशन ऑफ द मेन अबायोटिक न्यूट्रिएंट मटेरियल फाउंड इन द सॉइल, सेडिमेंटरी रॉक एक्सेट्रा ऑफ द अर्थ. एक्झाम्पल आयर्न, कॅल्शियम, कोल एक्सेट्रा. तर जे मेन अबायोटिक न्यूट्रिएंट्स आहे ते काय होतात सॉइल मध्ये की रॉक्स मध्ये अक्युमुलेट होतात, कलेक्ट होऊन जातात. एक्झाम्पल आणि ते नंतर काय होतात चेंज होतात कोल फॉर्म मध्ये, डायमंड फॉर्म मध्ये, फॉसिल फ्यूल फॉर्म मध्ये. त्याला आपण काय बोलणार सेडिमेंटरी सायकल. गॅसियस सायकल इज स्पीडियर दॅन सेडिमेंटरी सायकल. गॅसियस सायकल काय आहे फास्ट आहे, स्पीडियर आहे कंपेअर टू सेडिमेंटरी सायकल. So, let's start with carbon cycle. Carbon concentration in the atmosphere is 0.03%. So, let's start carbon cycle. Carbon concentration in the atmosphere is 0.03%. The circulation of carbon from atmosphere to biosphere, biosphere to hydrosphere, and hydrosphere to lithosphere, and again come back return into the atmosphere. This cyclic flow of carbon is known as carbon cycle. Plants requires carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis. So, plant takes atmospheric carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis. And when plants eaten up by the animals, the plant's carbon dioxide transfer into the animal body. And when plant and animal respires, they release out carbon dioxide again into the atmosphere. So this is a cyclic flow of carbon cycle. Most of the industries. So let's start carbon cycle. The concentration of carbon in atmosphere is 0.03%. Circulation of carbon from atmosphere to biosphere, biosphere to hydrosphere, and hydrosphere to lithosphere, and again come back return into the atmosphere. This cyclic flow of carbon is known as carbon cycle. So let's see the chart. Plants require carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis. So, plant trap carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into the form of glucose with the help of sunlight and chlorophyll. And when plants eaten by when animal plant when animal, look at this picture. Plants require carbon dioxide. So during the process of photosynthesis, plants trap carbon dioxide and convert it into the form of glucose with the help of sunlight and chloroform. And when plant eaten up by the animal, the plant's carbon dioxide transfers from plant body to animal body. And when plant and animal respires, they release out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere again. And when animal and plant dies, they get decomposed and get mixed into the soil and release out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and some of carbon trapped into the soil. Over a million years, it changes its form and converts it into coal, diamond, fossil fuel, etc. Let's see the main process in carbon cycle. Six molecules of Let's see the main process in carbon cycle. Here, first reaction. Let's start. The main process in carbon cycle. During photosynthesis, green plant in the presence of sunlight use water and carbon dioxide and convert oxygen into atmosphere and stored water and glucose. Look, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 12 molecules of water. With the help of sunlight and chlorophyll, it converts into glucose and 6 molecules of water and release out oxygen into the atmosphere. Glucose plus 6 molecules of oxygen. This process is carried out during the respiration in the mitochondria. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide release into the atmosphere and 6 molecules of water plus energy stored into the plant only. Let's see the oxygen cycle. Oxygen forms 21% of the atmosphere. Circulating and recycling of oxygen within biosphere is called as oxygen cycle. Oxygen cycle in biosphere is very complex and oxygen is highly reactive element. Oxygen found in various forms on the earth like water, H2O, carbon dioxide, CO2, molecule of oxygen, O2. Oxygen is continuously produced and used up by the organism in the atmosphere. Oxygen is released during the photosynthesis process and used up during the process like respiration, combustion, etc. Do you know microorganisms which need oxygen are also known as aerobics, and those who don't need oxygen, they are called as anaerobic. So let's see carbon cycle. Here, plants. Let's see carbon cycle. Plant release oxygen during the process of photosynthesis and takes carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis for their food process. And this release out oxygen respires by animal. Let's see the oxygen cycle. Plants release oxygen during the process of photosynthesis and takes carbon dioxide. This released oxygen takes by animal and plant and release out carbon dioxide during the process of respiration. So this process is continuously go on until the lifelong. Let's start nitrogen cycle. In atmosphere, its concentration is 78%. Plants cannot trap atmospheric nitrogen. So they, with the help of rhizobium bacteria, let's start nitrogen cycle. The atmospheric nitrogen, its concentration is 78%. The cyclic movement of nitrogen from atmosphere to soil and back into the atmosphere again is known as nitrogen cycle. Plants cannot trap atmospheric nitrogen. Thus, with the help of rhizobacteria present on the root nodules of leguminous plants, they convert atmospheric nitrogen into usable form like ammonia. There are mainly 5 steps of nitrogen cycle. The first one is nitrogen fixation, conversion of atmospheric nitrogen into usable forms such as ammonia with the help of rhizobium bacteria. Next is nitrogen assimilation. Nitrogen assimilation is the process of absorbing nitrates and ammonia into organic nitrogen is known as nitrogen fixation. This organic nitrogen is transferred into plant body to animal body when plant eaten up by the animal. Third one is ammonification. In ammonification, the process of converting organic nitrogen into ammonia when plant, when plant and animal dies is known as ammonification. In this process carried out with the help of saprophytes like fungi, bacteria. Next is nitrifying. Nitrifying bacteria involves in nitrification. Ammonia first converted into nitrites and then nitrites converted into nitrates with the help of nitrifying bacteria. Last step of nitrogen cycle is denitrification. Nitrates are converted into nitrogen into nitric oxide to maintain atmospheric nitrogen. Thank you.